Alright, today I'm going to show you how to inspect an S&C load buster. First thing you want to do, I'm not going to explain in this video, but get all your info onto the test sheet. The one thing I will tell you is right here is the serial number, and almost every one of these load busters have the serial number located right there. You put it on the sheet. Okay, first thing you want to do is remove the tube cover to reveal the end cap underneath. And as you take these parts off, you want to probably set them in order on the bench just so that you don't miss a part when you're putting it back together. Alright, going to loosen the end cap. And on the inside here you see a little 7/16 nut. You're going to put the 7/16 end wrench on that. And that's just to back up what you're going to do next, which is loosen the set screw, which is a smaller little screw inside. Then get the bigger screwdriver, line those up, and loosen the retaining screw. And this you're going to screw completely off of that nut, so that you can remove the end cap. Now, the next thing is the trigger assembly. Take your screwdriver and remove the 4 screws on the trigger assembly. So now we're able to remove the inner tube assembly. And let's take a look at the chassis. Make sure that the resetting latch works. Make sure the pull ring hook works. It moves in several different directions. Make sure there's no problems there. And we're going to remove the chassis cover. Now we're going to unscrew the bearing retainer, which is the gray end cap. So inside the bearing retainer will be the bearing and the inner tube seal. You check them all for wear, cracks, or breaks, or anything like that. And clean all the parts with a dry rag. Now when you reassemble the chassis cover, you're going to make sure the inner tube seal faces downward inside the bearing retainer like this. Then you replace the bearing. Screw the bearing retainer back on the chassis. Replace the chassis cover. And set the chassis aside. Now we're going to work on the inner tube assembly. Check the operation of the anchor assembly. Remove the silencer. Some of these silencers have counters on them and some of them don't, but they all pretty much have the same purpose. You want to check and make sure that they're clean. Now we got the retaining ring we have to remove. It's kind of a C-shaped ring, and if you push on it, usually with a screwdriver, and that'll get it started. Next, we remove the anchor assembly right here. Then there's a little Allen screw. You're going to remove the Allen set screw. Of course, I keep all these tools in the tray in the drawer at my workbench. So now we got the Allen screw removed. We're going to remove the stationary contact assembly. Check it for, make sure the inside of it's clean. Use a brush if you have to. Clean down inside. There's some arcing that happens in there. You want to clean that out. Check the stationary contact assembly. Clean up any arcing marks that are on that. If it's too arced over, you want to replace it. Now when we put it back in, you want that hole to line up with the other hole for your set screw, because that set screw goes right down into the second hole and keeps everything stationary. After you get that tight, you're going to replace the anchor assembly. And you want to make sure that you get the notches lined up here. Replace the retaining ring. And replace the silencer. Just needs to be hand tight. Now we're going to go to the moving contact assembly. We'll remove the guide bearing. Clean that up with a rag. Using a center punch then, you unscrew the two parts of the moving contact assembly from each other. Once you get that open, you stretch out the spring, check for frays or any arcs or burns, and then you put it all back together again. Tighten it with the center punch, good and snug. Replace the guide bearing. Replace the moving contact assembly back into the inner tube assembly. Now we're going to replace the inner tube assembly back into the chassis, and we do that by holding open the resetting latch, and it should go together pretty easily. You're going to match up both sides right here so that it looks like pretty well lined up. Got to get it about as close as you can. Line up the slot and the trigger assembly with the slot inside the inner tube, and you got to kind of get that down on there. It takes a little bit. And once you get that down, you want to tighten the 4 screws. Takes a little bit of work to get it lined up. You just have to play around with it. Now we're going to replace the end cap. Put your 7/16 on the inner nut. Tighten down the outside retaining screw. And with a smaller screwdriver, tighten the set screw. Now we're going to place a little bit of black grease right on the edge of that moving contact. That's the last thing you do before you close it up and tighten down the end cap. Now we check it for proper operation. and we ring it out with a voltmeter, making sure that the continuity is closed when it's closed and open when it's open. If everything checks out, we put a label on it, allowing it to be in use for 2 years. Expiration date 2 years from today's date. And with that, we're complete.